Thank you very much. Sorry for the inconvenience. So here I would be dealing in the following headings: the introduction to vitamin D, the definitions we have for adequacy and insufficiency, the prevalence of vitamin D deficiency in postmenopausal women, and what effects it shows on menopausal symptoms, its skeletal effects and extraskeletal effects, and what are the guidelines, and try to come to a reasonable conclusion from the evidences that I project. So, briefly about the synthesis and metabolism of vitamin D. So, we all know that there is 7-dehydrocholesterol in skin, which on exposure to UV rays, that is UVB, will lead to formation of pre-vitamin D, which with the help of the body heat gets converted to vitamin D and then enters the circulation. And in the liver, it is metabolized by 25 hydroxy vitamin D, 21 hydroxylase to 25 hydroxy vitamin D, which with 1 alpha hydroxylase produced from the kidneys becomes 125 dihydroxy vitamin D, which is the active form of the vitamin D and which acts by attaching to vitamin D receptors. So this 125 can be metabolized with 24 hydroxylase to calcitric acid, which is excreted. So what happens to this vitamin D with increasing age? So with the increasing age, there is decrease in the production of the vitamin D. If you look at the right side, there is a graph showing 7-dehydrocholesterol levels on the y-axis and age on the left x-axis. So if you look, the 7-dehydrocholesterol predominantly present in the epidermis, around 80% and 20% in the dermis. So both epidermal and dermal 7-dehydrocholesterol levels gradually decrease with the increasing age. So which leads to decrease in the substrate and the decrease in the vitamin D levels. And then the kidney, there is reduction in the production of 1 alpha hydroxylase, which leads to decreased production of 125 dihydroxy vitamin D. So along with that, there was slight intestinal resistance to this action of this 125 dihydroxy vitamin D, which leads to slight decrease in the calcium absorption. And then there can be decrease in the vitamin D receptors. So all of these as a contributing factors. With the increasing age, there can be decrease in the vitamin D levels and then the actions. So what happens to this vitamin D and how is it related to the menopause? So with menopause, there is decrease in the estrogen, which leads to increased bone turnover, which further leads to decrease in bone mineral density and increased risk of fractures. Along with that, there is decrease in the lean muscle mass, which would lead to musculoskeletal effects and the impaired quality of life. So estrogen is also known, absence of estrogen also causes mood disturbances, and it can lead to increased metabolic syndrome, that is in way of increasing central obesity and elevation of the triglycerides, along with increase the cardiovascular risk. So in this, with the decrease of estrogen, there is increase in the fat mass and decrease in the lean mass, which would in turn lead to vitamin D deficiency. So already decline in the estrogen is causing some menopausal symptoms. To that, addition of vitamin D deficiency would further cause aggravation of these symptoms. As of now, it is said that vitamin D do play a role on all these things. So identifying those who are at risk of vitamin D deficiency in the menopause and then treating them is important. But is there any direct relationship between this vitamin D and estrogen? There are few studies which show a direct relationship. There was a study done by Canute et al., which they have done in the mouse models. They found that vitamin D receptor is required for the gonadal function of both the sexes, both males and females. So this vitamin D directly causes aromatase gene expression. And second thing, it increases the calcium absorption, which again increases the estrogen biosynthesis. So this has been shown in the rat models. As of now, there are no human studies. The next thing is the opposite. Means the low estrogen levels increase the activity of 24 hydroxylase. Means 125 dihydroxy vitamin D gets metabolized to 25 dihydroxy vitamin D, thereby leading to decrease in the 125 dihydroxy vitamin D levels in the low estrogen phase. So whether these lead directly to the effects or not is yet to be proved. So coming to the definitions, so there are various cutoffs that have been proposed by societies. So as per the latest Endocrine Society guidelines, the 25 hydroxy vitamin D levels less than 20 nanogram per ml is defined as deficiency, and 21 to 29 is said to be insufficient, and above 30 nanogram per ml is said to be adequate as per the Endocrine Society. But this has been contradicted by the Institute of Medicine, which says that less than 20 nanogram per ml is only deficiency, and beyond that is not acceptable. Their argument is that when you look at this graph, you will see the bone health outcomes and the levels of vitamin D on x-axis. So when you look, their argument is that calcium absorption and BMD get almost a plateau stage between 16 to 20 nanogram per ml. So for the bone effects, maintaining 20 nanogram per ml is sufficient. But there are various studies which have shown that uh, there is increase in PTH even between 20 to 30 nanogram per ml. So increase in PTH would lead to increase in the bone porosity, which would further lead to increased risk of fractures. And there is another study which is not projected here, done by Heger et al. They found that the calcium absorption is also increased between 20 to 30 nanogram per ml, and then there it plateaus. So as per the Endocrine Society, more than 30 nanogram per ml would be required to maintain the bone health. So what is this prevalence of vitamin D deficiency in the menopausal woman? So as per the Western data and the European data put together, 22 studies, meta-analysis has shown that there is 25% inadequate vitamin D deficiency if 20 nanogram per ml is taken as the cutoff. So in these studies, those who had osteoporosis prior itself had a prevalence of 12.5 to 76%, and those who already have a history of fracture, the prevalence is 50 to 70%. The prevalence is much in institutionalized women compared to the community livings. But you need to understand here one more thing, that most of the Western foods are fortified with vitamin D, which is not so in India. When you look at the prevalence of vitamin D deficiency in India in postmenopausal women, we have 3 studies done by Harinarayan et al. From South India, and Vishal Tandon from North India, and Anita Kumari from Eastern India. So all these 3, when a same cutoff of 20 nanogram per ml is taken into consideration as a cutoff, the prevalence is 50 to 82%, which is much higher than the Western population. So now we have looked at what is the prevalence. So let us try to look at the evidence. Does this vitamin D really have anything to do with the menopause and postmenopause? First, looking at the postmenopausal symptoms. So this is a study, that is Women's Health Initiative study, actually done to look at the protection of HRT on cardiovascular risk. In the same study, they have supplemented vitamin D and calcium to prevent bone loss. So in this, there are 530 patients who had postmenopausal symptoms, who were, given calcium and vitamin D. But at the end of the study, they have categorized, depending on the vitamin D levels, into 25, 25 to 50, 50 and more than 75. More than 75 nanogram per ml is said to be adequate, which is equal to 30 nanogram per dl. So when they looked at the outcome, there is no significant difference in any of the menopausal symptoms, including hot flushes, night sweats, mood swings, vaginal dryness, sleep disturbances. So none of them has shown any significant improvement on supplementation and normalization of vitamin D levels. So next, coming to the skeletal effects that it shows. So this, it is known that vitamin D is required for the bone health. So in postmenopausal women, this is the study which looked at the bone turnover markers in the young postmenopausal women. So if you look at the study, it was those who had a normal BMD but who were vitamin D deficient were supplemented with 1,000 international units of vitamin D for 9 months, and they found that there is adequate increase even though it did not reach the normal levels. there is significant decrease in the PTH levels and the bone turnover markers with the supplementation of vitamin D. And there is no increase in the calciuria. So they have concluded that those who have vitamin D deficiency, isolated supplementation is associated with improvement in the bone turnover markers. So this is a study of meta-analysis which has looked at the vitamin D treatment for the prevention of osteoporosis in postmenopausal women. If you look, the upper table gives the vertebral and non-vertebral fracture risk reduction. So when you look, there is improvement or significant decrease in the vertebral fracture risk, and predominantly that risk is reduced to those who were supplemented with hydroxylated vitamin D than standard vitamin D. But the same effect is not seen with the non-vertebral fractures. And when you look at the down table, it looked into the bone mineral density improvement with the supplementation of vitamin D. Yes, it has shown that hydroxylated vitamin D has improved the total bone density. The predominant improvement is shown in the level of the lumbar spine and slightly on the forearm side. But when you look at the heterogeneity, if you look that all the studies, they varied much in their characteristics and the definitions, which showed on the whole as an increase in the bone mineral density. So they concluded that vitamin D do decrease vertebral fractures, but may not decrease non-vertebral fractures. And this is the latest meta-analysis. Truly, this is not a postmenopausal study. I would say it is more of in the elderly population where calcium and vitamin D were supplemented. So when they found that the meta-analysis has shown that the calcium and vitamin D supplementation has reduced the fracture risk by 6% in total fractures, whereas 16% in the hip fracture reduction. The same study, when they have looked only with vitamin D, they did not find any significant improvement. But to conclude this as a post-menopausal improvement or not improvement, this included both. So maybe separate segregation of women and post-menopausal women need to be done to say exactly what it does with the post-menopausal women. So to combine what benefit or risk associated with this vitamin D supplementation in postmenopausal women. So here I have presented two graphs. The upper graph where the risk of fall and fracture has been marked in relation to vitamin D dose. The down one is the fracture and fall risk in relation to the serum vitamin D levels. So here the black triangles represent the fall risk, whereas the round dark circles represent the non-vertebral fracture risk. So when you look, both fracture risk and fall risk have improved or showed a positive benefit way beyond 600 international units. Up to 1000 international units, there is a gradual improvement in the fracture risk as well as the fall risk. When the same has been translated to the vitamin D, serum vitamin D levels, you see that a significant improvement in the falls and fracture risk was noted between 60 to 70 nanomoles per liter, that is around 30 nanogram per ml. This same linear as the vitamin D levels increase, the fall risk and the fracture risk has decreased. So it shows that the fall risk and fracture risk do improve, but the benefit can be noted way beyond 600 international units per day. But what is the risk that is associated with this vitamin D supplementation? The first is the risk of any hypercalcemia. So you can see the black squares here, which represent the serum calcium levels. So if you look less than 2.6 millimoles, which is equal to 10.5 milligram per dr, none of the levels, either in the serum vitamin D levels or the supplementation levels, even up to 1 lakh international units per day, did increase the serum calcium levels. So they concluded that to get an optimal benefit, a serum vitamin D level that is 75 to 110 nanomole, which is equal to 30 to 44 nanogram per ml, shows benefits. To attain that level, 1800 to 4000 international units of vitamin D need to be supplemented. This is about the bone. Now coming to the low backache, which is the most common complaint we see with the most postmenopausal women. So this is a retrospective study which has looked at the postmenopausal women who has complained of low backache. So when you look at the bar chart showing mild pain and severe pain, the vitamin D levels which are shown on the y-axis, there is significant difference in the vitamin D levels. Those with higher vitamin D levels had less pain compared to the severe pain. And you look at the osteopenia and osteoporosis also, the vitamin D levels were significantly less than the normal population. So, what is the mechanism that has been proposed for this low backache and the vitamin D levels? So, it is said that the vitamin D, low vitamin D increases the skeletal muscle hypersensitivity because of increase in the nerve terminal endings exposure in the skeletal muscles. Second thing is there can be increased risk of inflammation, and decrease in muscle strength and muscle mass could lead to more instability, which would further cause injuries and lead to disc degeneration. So the same thing has been done with the supplementation of vitamin D, whether does it improve. So here is a study where in 360 patients, of which 90% of them were females, those who had, if you look in the table, those who had a low vitamin D deficiency showed 100% improvement in the low backache, but those who already had a normal vitamin D, there is only 68% reduction in the pain. So the vitamin D supplemented here is around 5,000 units per day who are less than 50 kg and who are more than 50 kg. They have supplemented 10,000 units per day. Coming to the muscle strength and muscle mass. So here you can see a graph. The upper graph shows the global improvement in the muscle strength with vitamin D supplementation. The middle one shows the vitamin D supplementation, the increase in muscle mass. The third one shows the supplementation on muscle power. If you look at the first one, that is the global muscle strength, there is significant improvement in the global muscle strength when a meta-analysis was taken from 30 randomized control trials. But in this, the predominantly they showed benefit those who had 30 nanomoles per liter. And older people had shown much benefit compared to the younger subjects. But when you look at the muscle mass and the muscle power, there is no significant improvement with vitamin D supplementation, either in the muscle mass or the muscle strength. So their vitamin D supplementation can have a small positive impact on muscle strength, but whether it can be maintained in whom, what is the dosage strength and what is the duration of treatments needs to be determined. So we have looked till now the vitamin D. So most of the times we do see that vitamin D is always supplemented with calcium. So does this calcium supplementation have any extra benefit in postmenopausal women with osteoporosis? So here is a meta-analysis done with 15 randomized control trials. They have taken who were supplemented with only calcium for at least 1 year. So here is a table where it has shown that both the vertebral and the non-vertebral fractures, there is no significant reduction in the fracture risk with calcium supplementation. So when they looked at the bone mineral density, yes, there is improvement in the bone mineral density to a significant extent as it in total and each site in specific. But when you look the heterogeneity between the studies, there is huge difference on the calcium supplements, the amount of calcium given and the duration of calcium given, so which needs to be taken into consideration when interpreting the results. So they concluded that calcium supplementation can give a small positive benefit on bone density, maybe a slight trend towards vertebral fracture reduction, but not much on non-vertebral fracture reduction. So we have seen what is the positive side. So does this have the same implications in all other things? Are there any concerns on the supplementation? So here I have reflected a study which has taken the randomized control trial of 15 studies, and then they have looked at the risk point of the calcium supplementation. So when you look, the upper graph shows the MI incidence and the lower graph shows the stroke incidence. So if you look, both MI and stroke are significantly higher in those who were supplemented with calcium. So they say that any benefit that you get with calcium supplementation for fracture prevention overweighed by increased cardiovascular risk. So because of this unfavorable risk benefit profile, so it is preferable to avoid calcium supplements. But the same has not been noted with dietary calcium supplementation. So they say that encourage the same calcium supplement, which is around 1200 milligrams for postmenopausal women, through dietary, which may not increase the cardiovascular risk. And what is the other side effect that can be noted with the calcium supplementation? So this is a graph showing from Women's Health Initiative study, which has looked at the urinary tract stone formation. So when they found that there is 17% increased risk of stone formation, but the same thing has not been reflected in most of the studies. But when you look at the graph clearly, they say that the stone formation risk has shown a difference between supplemented and non-supplemented beyond 5 years of follow-up. So most of the studies which have looked into the calcium and the fracture risk have looked at maximum 4 years. The most of them are 1 to 2 years. So to conclude, vitamin D, those who were deficient, yes, they can say that there can be improvement in the bone mineral density and improvement in the fracture risk. But calcium, those who don't take nutritional uh, up to 1200 milligrams can be given supplements, but otherwise the risk with calcium supplements outweighs the benefits. Coming to the extraskeletal effects, so there has been so many things that have been attributed to vitamin D effects. There are cardiovascular risk, cancer risk, metabolic risk, diabetes, depression. Most of them has been attributed to vitamin D levels. But do this truly translate into the outcomes on supplementation of vitamin D is what I would concentrate now. So this is a study. This is Vitol study which has looked at the vitamin D supplementation and omega fatty acids